Hi all, you are welcome to this Indigenous mini-grid developers webinar on the Universal Energy Facility, which is a new results-based financing facility. My name is Anita Otubo, and I've been invited by Sustainable Energy for All to facilitate today's event. I'm currently the head of the Program Management Unit for the Nigeria Electrification Project, which is a $550 million funded program provided or funded by loan facilities provided by the World Bank and the African Development Bank. This program seeks to increase access to power for those in rural communities, targeting households, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, as well as public, educational, and healthcare institutions, through the provision of mini-grids, solar home systems, and captive power plants. Like the Universal Energy Facility, the Nigeria Electrification Project also uses a results-based financing approach through our performance-based grants and our output-based funds. This essentially allows for our mini-grid developers and solar home system suppliers to access finance upon the successful verification of energy connections. Now, with that being said, the essence or the objective of this meeting today is to introduce you to this new results-based financing facility, which is the Universal Energy Facility. We have a great panel of speakers today that will be giving you their perspective on results-based financing. And you're going to hear about what the Universal Energy Facility is all about and how to participate and how it's going to be used to scale up access to power across Sub-Saharan Africa. And also to encourage more participation from our indigenous mini-grid developers in Africa. Before I invite the first speaker to provide us with the opening remarks, I'd just like to remind you that if you have any questions, please feel free to type up your questions in the questions and answers section. You can locate it on the bottom of the screen. There's a panel at the bottom of the screen. And at the end of the session, there is at least 40 minutes available for questions and answers, so your questions shall be duly answered. So with that being said, I'd like to ask Ms. Damilola, who is the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of the UN Energy, to provide us with the opening remarks. Ms. Damilola Gumbi is also the Commissioner of the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty. She was formerly the Managing Director of the Nigeria Rural Electrification Agency, formerly a Senior Special Advisor to the Nigerian President on Power, as well as a former Managing Director of the Lagos State Electricity Board. Ms. Damilola Gumbi, we'd be grateful to hear your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and everybody's busy schedule to be here today. It's really, really great to see some really great familiar faces, and I hope you're all keeping safe and doing well. On behalf of Sustainable Energy for All, we are excited to introduce the Universal Energy Facility, referred to here as the UEF. The UEF is a multi-donor results-based financing facility that will significantly improve the speed, scale, and delivery of energy connections in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a true collaborative effort, and we have some great partners, which include Rockefeller, Shell Foundation, UK DFID, USAID, Good Energies, and also AMDA that's been working with us to develop, what is the UEF. And particularly why we're here today is because we really want to hear from the voices of the indigenous developers. As an aside, my entire career has been developed, or I wouldn't get to this stage without the indigenous local developers. So in any type of thing I wanted to do on the global level before we finalize, it was really important to basically hear your voice. In terms of SE4, our key role in this program is basically program manager. It's being headed by Ruchi, who's a very, very talented young lady from India, and also our very own Nigerian Rosemary, who are really conducting this. And this is also because we're very big on gender as well. And it's really important for us to follow in the footsteps of Anita and show that women can lead global, multi-million-dollar aid programs. So in terms of Sustainable Energy for All, if you don't know us, it's an international organization, and our whole focus, the only reason why we exist is to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is access to clean, affordable, reliable, and modern energy for all. But the truth is we're not on track. Globally, there's still 789 million people who don't have access to electricity, and 565 million of those actually reside in Africa. So this is really, really important that as we're developing all these solutions, we really take this opportunity with the pandemic to actually recover better. Research has shown and data has shown that off-grid solutions are probably the fastest and the most cost-effective way to provide power to these 565 million people. And we honestly believe that results-based finance presents a paradigm shift from your typical grant-based subsidies to making sure that until things are clearly verified and connections are made, the people actually get funding. We're also committed to making sure that the UEF supports Indigenous developers. We do know some of the parts of the program sometimes might be a little bit more strenuous for Indigenous developers, and we will try our best, but we do have to understand that we are working with international finance, and sometimes they have some requirements that we can't change. But it's important for us because the benefits need to be felt locally. We need to empower local developers, contractors, and entrepreneurs. And I'm again really excited today that I heard this morning that one of the young women that Anita had trained while I was still at the REA just got a grant from Rockefeller and All On Foundation for 10,000, and she's still in university. So we're not just saying we want to do it. This is something we've been doing for many years, and we're now having kind of Ruchi and Rosemary take on the mantle to make sure this happens. I'm really, really looking forward to their presentation, really, really looking forward to your thoughts. Again, this session isn't everything that's wrong with the sector and everything that's wrong with Indigenous developers. This session is to try and find concrete ways forward and before we launch this program and to make sure everybody's truly engaged. Again, I'd just like to thank all of you for joining us today and bringing your expertise. Look forward to all the questions, and again, leave it in the very, very capable hands of Anita and others who are going to facilitate today. Thank you very much. Back to you, Anita.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Ms. Damalola. Moving swiftly on to the next item on the agenda, as I mentioned, we have some very, let's say we have leading experts in this industry, in the mini-grid industry, that we would like to hear from as it concerns their thoughts on results-based financing and how our Indigenous companies can benefit from such in order to increase access to power for all across Africa. So that being said, I'd like to ask Ms. Catherine Mukobo, who is the Executive Director, and please forgive me for my very poor French speaking skills as I try and pronounce the name of the association, but she's the Executive Director of the Association Congolais Énergie Renouvelable Décentralisée, ACERD, Industry Association in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if we can hear your remarks, we will be grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you for trying. At least you did try to say that in French, but ACERD is perfect as well. Thank you, Mrs. Damilola. That was a brilliant introduction as well. As said so, as you know, and I think all of you being involved in renewable energy and in Africa, the DRC market is one of the biggest, I think, just after Nigeria or just compared to Nigeria. So for me, RBF will be one of the best programs that we can put on the market to make sure that we can monitor, we can control, and really make sure that the people who need energy or access to energy really receive the energy we are talking about. And with such program, we're not just gonna see investors coming, providing different product, and then running away as soon as they receive their money. It's always good to know as well that before getting your return of investment, make sure that what you promise to the population, to the people, really is on the ground, is on the market, and make sure that government as well follow on that path. Currently in DRC, I would say we are on stage pilot phase. It's really the beginning. I think we didn't see more than 2 or 3 programs coming out of the market as a RBF program. So it's, I would say, less than 10%. It's pilot phase. Hopefully, it will attract more investors and more funding partner, and make sure that we can grow that at least to 30 to 40% of the market in a short time, being receiving access to energy with products which are available on the market. This is one of the reasons why the association was made, was built, so that the private sector can get involved into such program and make sure that they can direct the right investment towards the right region, towards the right area for the population to have access to energy. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for those remarks. Very exciting and amazing work that's being done. So thank you. Just to stress that we have 2 minutes for each of our guest speakers. If I can now ask Mr. Segun Adaju to please also provide us with your opening remarks. So just so that we have enough time for questions and answers, I'll be grateful if we can stick to the 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Thank you, Damilola. Good to see you. And I'll say good afternoon to everyone. My name is Segun Adaju. I have the privilege of being the president of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. So result-based financing is basically the one that ensures that actual payments are made for actual job done. So we've seen real connections being made. We've seen customers being satisfied before grants are being offered to project developers. And recently we had a win in Nigeria where the first commercial under-grid mini-grid was done by one of the beneficiaries of the result-based financing in Nigeria too. So it's exciting to see that this same framework is taking universal. I had Damilola mention universal energy facility. So the experience that we've had in Nigeria is going global, and this is a very welcome development. And we're happy to see local partners being a major stakeholder in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Segun, who is the president of the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, which is situated within the country that I'm currently located and working in. Thank you very much. Now, if I can ask Mr. Sande Kaberebe, and I apologize if I have also butchered your surname. He is the CEO of the Energy Private Developers, EPD of Rwanda. We would be grateful to hear your remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anita. Can everyone hear? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can do. Please go ahead.
Great. Yeah, I'll try to use the 2 minutes as softly as I could. Thank you for this initiative. I think we believe that in any part of the world, sustainable development cannot exist without energy mix. And we believe in off-grid solutions such as solar home systems and mini-grids. In Rwanda, particularly, we have seen a slow growth in that area in the past 3 to 2 years. There are so many issues that my colleagues who are online participants will chip in later. But we believe RBFs do work, and this is what we need for us to be able to speed up access. We have 2 types of off-grid solutions in Rwanda. So hydro mini-grids, we do have in Rwanda, we have a lot of potential for small hydro, and also potential for small solar mini-grids, and also solar home systems. So most of the issues that we're going to discuss here are around how can we structure. We want to listen to and also to contribute to how we could structure the RBF for indigenous companies. I think Damiola mentioned about eligibility requirements that have been stringent in the past RBF schemes. These are very tough for indigenous companies to access such funds because of the way they are structured and the kind of very high requirements, which we will discuss. We also want to see local banks having facilitation and also having the appetite for providing soft loans for local companies. I think this is something we could advocate for. And on our daily to do work and activities in EPD, we really want to see these indigenous companies be involved in the roadmap 2050 of the energy access, both in solar and hydro mini grids. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Sandy. Now, moving on to Mr. Isaiah Nyakusendwa, who is the chairman, Renewable Energy Association of Zimbabwe, and also the founder and CEO of Sub-Saharan Energy. You're welcome, sir. We look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. I'm glad to be speaking at this event. And from Zimbabwe, I just need to highlight the fact that this is probably coming at the right time where we have just launched our renewable energy policy, where we are wanting to increase, the uptake of renewable energy to about 1,100 megawatts, by 2025, outside the large hydro projects. And equally as well, our energy access is quite low. So we have had a number of, IPPs that have been registered. And one of the issues that they've been struggling with is the issue of funding. And RBF comes in at the right time. And we think that it would be helpful to our sector. One of the other issues as well is that most of our people staying in the rural areas, and 70% use a biomass, as a source of their energy. And the issue of clean cooking is also a major issue that needs also to be looked at. We have also, the issues of solar home systems that have been rolled out. We have a couple of companies that have been the torchbearers in the sector. We want to see more taking place there. And I think the issue about the number of funders coming together is also important, because the sector needs a lot of coordination, so that, resources can be pulled in for financing. However, the issue that needs to be looked at is, I think Sandy alluded to the issue of eligibility there, that, indigenous developers would also want that to be considered, as well as the formulation. I see you have an advisory board. I don't know whether there is also scope to have, places for, indigenous, developers to be also part of the people that give input in as far as policy is concerned. The stimulation of local financial institution is quite key. And if this can also be linked to them also coming on board, because that would also be key as well. I would say with those short remarks, I hope we can have a fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Isaiah, for that. Listening to all of the speakers, what I got from this is that it's accepted that across these African countries, there isn't adequate access to power supply, and that there is need for us to scale up, utilizing renewable energy sources and ensuring that there's access to finance, in particular for our indigenous companies, indigenous mini-grid companies within Africa. So thank you very much for your remarks. Moving on swiftly to the next item on the agenda, we are going to be hearing from Sustainable Energy for All's Ruchi Sonny, who is a program manager, and Rosemary Idem, who is the energy specialist on the Universal Energy Facility. They will be providing us with an overview of the Universal Energy Facility, as well as taking us through the registration process towards being able to participate in this laudable program. Thank you very much. Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita, and a pleasure to be here with the leading voices in the off-grid space in Africa. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well and staying safe. I will now take you through a short deck which highlights the genesis of the Universal Energy Facility, or the UEF, and really the high-level contours of the what, why, and how of this facility, after which I will pass it to my colleague Rosemary Edom to dive into the details. Next slide, please. So as part of SE4All's focus and steer from advocacy to action and our vision of in-country implementation, we're extremely excited to be gearing up for the last decade of implementation for achieving sustainable goal number 7, which is really this access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. The UEF, or the Universal Energy Facility, or the UEF, is a collaboration between Sustainable Energy for All in its capacity as the program manager, along with other partners, the logos of who you'll see on the screen, which includes Shell Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Power Africa, Good Energies, Carbon Trust, DFID, and the Africa Mini-Grids Developers Association. Next slide, please. The UEF is being set up as a multi-donor, results-based financing facility with the goal of delivering energy connections in Africa. The two things that we've been emphasizing throughout is this promoting this paradigm shift, something that Damilola also mentioned, from procurement to results-based financing, and doing this with both speed and scale. And this is our vision for unlocking finance in the continent. To jump right in, I'll answer the big question now. Why are we doing this? I think the short answer here, again, something that Damilola highlighted, is that we're not on track to reach the goal of providing access to clean, affordable, reliable energy for all by 2030. Globally, there are still 789 million people who do not have access. So what we recognized at our end was that current procurement models for delivering energy access projects are time-consuming for both the private sector, the governments, and also impose this high administrative cost on governments, donors, and the project developers alike. Next slide, please. So what is RBF? Results-based financing, or RBF, is really a way to provide incentive payments to eligible organizations that deploy energy solutions and provide verified end user energy connections. And many of you are part of that solution. Next slide, please. Results-based financing is a proven, viable alternative to procurement approaches for energy projects to deliver connections faster and more efficiently, as we've seen in Nigeria already. You'll see in our theory of change at the bottom of the page, and something that we're constantly saying is that the aim is to provide and promote this paradigm shift in energy access finance through both advocacy as well as thought leadership on benefits of RBF for energy access. We genuinely believe that this paradigm shift will speed up the delivery of these new energy connections. Next slide, please. The UEF is a large financing vehicle, as we've structured it, to provide RBF incentives for developers of off-grid solutions across Africa. We have rather detailed slides here, which we will be sharing with you, and some of you have already taken a look. But the idea is to provide a very brief overview of the facility and the results that we intend to achieve. I think to preempt two questions that we've received very often is that the Universal Energy Facility will launch this year, where the developers in 2 initial countries of Sierra Leone and Madagascar will be able to apply for pre-qualification and then begin submitting site-specific applications to the UEF. We will get into the details of how this process will run when Rosemary presents it. Just to add that the application process for the UEF will be streamlined through an online interface that will provide this transparent and standardized criteria for all. A second point that I want to highlight is that the UEF will include mini-grids and focus on mini-grids in its first wave, and then expand to cover solar home systems and clean cooking solutions in the next phases. Previous slide, please. On one of the slides, you'll see that we've laid out the key results targeted for each of the waves. And the ultimate goal really here is being to develop the UEF as a $500 million financing vehicle that delivers 2.3 million energy connections by 2023. When I say 2.3 million energy connections, this includes solar home systems, mini grids, and clean cooking. Overall, our vision for the UEF is to provide this advocacy, advisory, as well as a financing vehicle all rolled into one to promote this transition to RBF approaches. This slide also emphasizes our essence of our philosophy, which is really that the international community should focus on greater resources coordinated through one mechanism, something Mr. Isaiah also mentioned. We recognize that close to $40 billion US dollars are required to be achieving universal energy access, and close to $5 billion for clean cooking, according to the IEA. And while we think the resources are available, they're still directed in a very fragmented manner, which again, where we feel that the UEF will play a pivotal role. Next slide, please. As you'll see in this slide, we feel RBF will provide this much needed shift to provide finance, both at the speed and scale that's required here. As you'll see to the right in the previous slide, shifting to RBF really allows for three main things for governments and donors. So one, to shift the risk of delivery towards the private sector. This is where we think that the private sector can really step up their role and be able to showcase results. A second part around providing greater regularity, certainty to the industry and the private sector about financial support that is provided. This again speaks to the point that if there is coordinated resources coming into the sector, we will be able to see results. A third point, which is linked to the second one, is around this aggregated financing and scale, which can be supported across the continent and not country by country approach. Next slide, please. I will not go through this slide in detail, especially in Damilola and Anita's presence, who are really the gurus on this, but I did want to highlight that the UEF has looked at the Nigeria electrification project as an example of a large-scale RBF facility with the intention to really replicate what we've seen there and replicate that success all over. Very, very briefly, the NEP, or the Nigerian electrification project, aims to increase electricity access to households, micro, small, and medium enterprises, students, schools, and patients at universities and teaching hospitals across Nigeria. The Rural Electrification Agency is the implementing agency for the project and worked with both the World Bank as well as AFDB to design the program. The project has both results-based financing and tender program due to that was available as part of this program. And we saw that the RBF projects were proceeding much faster. Again, not to go into the details, and you'll see this on your slides, slide pack that we share with you later, but this was one example for us which clearly highlighted the success seen in Nigeria. Next slide, please. This slide is really a snapshot to highlight our plan for wave one. So what we mean by wave one, or our phase one, is that the UEF currently has $3 million US in funding secured for a subsidy disbursement at $433 per mini grid connection. In all, we're expecting 6,000 connections expected across the two countries in Sierra Leone and Madagascar, and the grant disbursements will really be made on a first-come, first-served basis. Project developers will again be pre-qualified based on several factors, including experience, financial viability, and you'll see us taking you through more details when Rosemary presents. My final point here being that the eligible projects will include solar hybrid mini grids as part of this wave one, which will allow for 60% renewable energy. Finally, before I hand it over to my colleague, I did want to quickly mention that if you'd like to ask any question during the session, and we really encourage that you do, please type it out in the question answer interface at the bottom of the screen. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Rosemary Dum, to take us through the design and the process of UEF in detail. Over to you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Richie, and thank you everyone for joining. I will now quickly take you through the details of the UEF design and the application processes. Next slide, please. Right. As Richie mentioned at her part of the presentation, the RBF grant will be available to eligible projects on a rolling basis. What this means is that we'll be accepting applications based on funding availability. The grants will be set at $433 as Richie mentioned, and projects eligible for this wave are solar hybrid mini grids with at least 60% renewable energy. And we'll be looking to receive applications for projects in unserved areas. Grant disbursements will be made when connections are verified on a first-come, first-served basis. Next slide, please. The entire application and approval process is expected to span a period of about 21 months. The qualification and the site-specific technical application is expected to happen within 3 months, after which a grant agreement will be signed. For the construction of the mini-grid, because it's solar, we are specifying that all mini-grids should be completed within a maximum of 12 months. After which the verification and disbursement process will commence. All applications will be done online. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, for the UEF application approval process for mini-grids, this is a 13-step process split across 5 key stages. The first stage is the pre-qualification stage. At this stage, the developer is invited to submit an application on the UEF platform. When the evaluation process is completed and the applicant is successful, they may now proceed to the second stage. This is the site-specific stage where the developer submits a site-specific technical application or a project application. This is now technically reviewed and evaluated across set criteria. And if they succeed or they're successful, they proceed to the grant agreement signing stage. At this stage, a grant agreement is signed between the UEF and the developer, and the developer can now proceed to the build stage. At this stage, the developer will now commence the construction of the project, install smart meters, and upload connection details to the UEF platform. After 60 days, the developer is now invited to proceed to the verification stage where they submit a claims report on the connections made. These connections will then be remotely verified, and an on-the-ground random check will be done, after which the developer will receive the grant disbursements. All these key steps will be done online and through the UEF platform. Next slide, please. The qualification criteria. This slide details the criteria used to evaluate the first stage, which is the pre-qualification stage. The key areas we'll be using to evaluate the developer is 1, the eligibility. Here we expect that the developer can demonstrate that they're a legal entity registered in Sub-Saharan Africa with legal rights to build and operate a mini-grid. The expectation here is that the developer must have built and operated a mini-grid since 2017. On the ENS compliance, the developer has to show that they have a clean track record of complying with ENS laws. And these laws and this compliance has to align with the UEF or the host country's standards. For the technical capacity criteria, we'll be evaluating the applicant's experience in developing and operating a mini-grid. For the financial capacity, we'll be looking to see that the applicant is able to secure financing either through equity or debt. Here, we expect to see things like an audited financial account and letters of commitment from investors. Another key criteria we'll be evaluating is the gender composition of the applicant. Here, the expectation is that the developer should have at least 30% of female in employment at the time of applying. Next slide, please. The UEF here is making efforts to encourage the participation of indigenous developers in the UEF. Here, one of the two key steps we are taking is one in the financial capacity of the developer. Here, we expect that we would not be requiring applicants to demonstrate their available pre-financing through commercial means. What this means is that the applicants can put forward concessional pre-financing for their projects, and this will be accepted by the UEF. A second key step we are taking is ensuring that we award at least 25% of the total funding for projects put forward by indigenous developers. Next slide, please. Next slide. The site-specific technical application criteria include the site data, which we'll be evaluating. Here we expect to see the energy audit data from the developer, which shows us the location, the number of households, the number of potential connections, the projected load profile for the project. Another key criteria we'll be looking at is the site design. We'll be evaluating the generation and distribution design to ensure that it meets our minimum requirements and standards, which is 60% of renewable energy and having a load availability of about 80%. The next key criteria we'll be looking at is evidence of regulatory compliance. The expectation is that the developer must have secured all the necessary permits and licenses required to operate the mini grid in that country. Another key area we'll be looking at is local support. Here we expect that the developer has secured an MOU or letter from the community where the site is located, authorizing them to build and operate a mini grid in that area. And finally, another criteria is the financing. We would like to see that the developer can raise the required funding to construct and build the project. Next slide, please. This slide just details the minimum technical requirements we'll be looking at. Here we'll be assessing the service standards being proposed by the application. Here we're looking at the power quality, power reliability, power availability, and in terms of minimum technical requirements, these have to align with the UEF's requirements, where we expect prepaid meters to be used, the distribution grid to be aligned with our requirements, the battery storage devices will be evaluated, and the PV modules and mounting. Next slide. This slide details the key requirements based on the UEF standards. Here we expect that the PV, in terms of the PV module, the type of solar cell should be crystalline. In terms of batteries and energy storage systems, we'll be accepting lead acid batteries or lithium ion batteries. For metering, as I stated earlier, we want the developers to use prepaid smart meters, and the distribution system should be between 220 to 240 volts. Next slide, please. On the grant agreement, the grant agreement to be signed will be standardized and non-negotiable. The grant period is 18 months, and we expect that the solar hybrid mini grid should be constructed and completed within the 12-month period. Otherwise, the grant will be terminated. Another key area to highlight here is on the reporting requirements that will be as part of the grant agreement. We'll be expecting quarterly reports to be made through the online platform detailing customer usage statistics, system uptime percentage, and gender impact data. Once connections are made, the grantee is expected to submit metering data after 60 days of consumption. These connections that should be submitted once a month, and for any claim to be made, the developer must have connected at least 200 customers. Once the connection is verified, disbursements will be made. Next slide, please. Thank you. Back to you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Rosemary and Ruchi, for this presentation. Very insightful, a lot of information there. I've been literally jotting away so that I could also share this information with our local mini-grid developers and solar home system providers who may not have been able to participate in this webinar. So thank you very much. And that now takes us to the very most important, or actually after your presentation, the second most important segment of this webinar, which is the questions and answers session. So if I can ask participants to please send in their questions, and I'm happy to ask your questions on your behalf so that members of the Sustainable Energy for All team can respond to. Okay, so I can see we have about 1 or 2 questions coming up. Just wanted to start off with 1 or 2 questions. So this question is based on eligibility. I can see that Sustainable Energy for All is really making the effort to encourage Indigenous mini-grid developers to participate or benefit from the Universal Energy Facility. I just wondered how many mini-grids, and talking of experience, how many mini-grids would these mini-grid developers have to have constructed and operated before they can become eligible to apply for this universal energy facility. And so that question is to either Ruchi or Rosemary. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita, and let me take this one. Thanks for that question. So I guess one of the main criteria for UEF is that all applicants must own and operate at least one existing operational mini-grid. It also needs to meet a set of technical specifications. And while I'm happy to give you an overview here, we'll also make sure that this is circulated to everyone attending the webinar today. So the technical specifications in a nutshell include things like that the generation technology has to be documented via a commissioning report, which we will ask as evidence through in the pre-qualification process. There are other factors such as that the national or the local standards compliance must have been met and documented through this commissioning report as well. We're also hoping that the distribution voltage, that is between 220 to 240 volt, must be documented as well. Again, our hope is that these operational mini-grids would be renewable energy based, and a bare minimum of 60% of that capacity installed would have been renewable energy based. And again, documented via this commissioning report. Finally, I think there are a few things which Rosemary laid out as well, which is that, we are hoping that these mini-grid or this mini-grid in question would have been designed and operated for about 20 hours a day. And again, should be documented, we should have the proof for it. I guess three last things, which is again that we are hoping that this mini-grid would have operated for a year. So we would like to see 12 months of historical operation with at least 250 connections and active meter readings. So that was a lot of mumbo jumbo thrown here, but that in a nutshell is our criteria for what kind of previous mini-grid experience we're expecting. Over to you, Anita.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ruchi, for that clarification. I've just noticed that Leah Suma, who was supposed to be or is one of our guest speakers, has just arrived. If you can permit me to also allow her to provide some remarks. She is the board member of the Renewable Energy Association of Sierra Leone. So if Leah Suma, if you can please provide us with some remarks. Thank you so much for joining us.
My sincere apologies. Thank you very much. Thanks for organizing. I am Leah Sumer. I'm a member of the board, one of 6 members of the board of the Renewable Energy Association of Sierra Leone. Also, I am the director of operations for a company, a local indigenous company in Sierra Leone, FLS Group. We are energy service unit. We operate under a unit named FLS Power. So, our thoughts. I'm really excited about the opportunity. We're glad that there's the financial, there's the opportunity to provide finance to indigenous companies. So what are the gaps? The gaps, as we're all aware, is access to finance. However, there are lots of, at least within the context of Sierra Leone, there's a little bit more. There's economic context as well. So there's the operational profitability of running mini grids, and hence the issue and the gap to accessing finance, because the number is a little bit difficult over a short period of time to get to profitability. So I'm just really curious, and I'd really like to land on the 250 connections as a requirement. I'm going to ask the question whether this just generic. So within it being deployed, so through something like 90 under that, and the question is, there are economic contexts that limits connections within these specific communities. Within our environment that we're working in, and there's a small community called Gemu, we're targeting 300. We think that's, even at 300, we think that is ambitious. So there's a lot of economic context that needs to be taken into consideration as we look at this results-based financing. that we would really like you to think around. So we would like you to really think around making sure that these requirements are context-based, are local-based as you look at how we're setting up criteria. For the local environment within Sierra Leone, we think that so there's a huge energy gap. There's something like potentially 70. They're looking at up to 300 megawatts deficiency in terms of the energy gap within country. And renewable energy, specifically mini grids, there is a real consideration from a national perspective in trying to meet that that energy deficiency gap. The opportunity for private sector to provide private sector to participate is an exciting one, because it's the only real way that you'll ensure sustainability over a long period of time.
So
just as I was saying, as an investment portfolio for private equity finance,
so we've seen connections being made.
The economic context
customers being satisfied
could be quite challenging. So grant-based finance to mitigate the deficit, the energy deficit within the Sierra Leone context is super exciting for the private sector players, the local private sector players. So we're excited about the opportunity, and we really look forward to criteria that are not just generic within the sub-region, but that are localized and contextualized, because the environments are different. So that's sort of like what I'd like to contribute.
Very informative. Thank you. So moving swiftly back to the questions and answers section. I see we now have a lot more questions. Let me get to them. Okay, so we have one question here. It says, from the specifics that target Madagascar and Sierra Leone, when do you expect to expand to other regions and countries, especially Kenya? So that question is put to either Rosemary or Ruchi. Thank you.
I can take that one quickly. So thank you for that question. I guess, a short answer here is that our hope originally was that we would have been able to show results in both Sierra Leone and Madagascar this year. Obviously, COVID-19 threw a wrench in those plans. But this is to say that the goal of this facility is always to be a Pan-African one. So while, yes, Wave 1 includes these two countries, the idea is for this to be a rolling process starting next year. Over to you, Anita.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rochi, for answering that question. Let me just move my panel, which is stopping me from seeing the questions. Okay, we have a question here. Does a developer need to show financial viability in terms of LCOE? And I guess most of these questions, if not all of them, are for the Sustainable Energy for All team. So please go ahead.
Richard, do you want to take this one also? Or Rosemary, one of you, please.
Okay. Both mics are on mute. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Rosemary, do you want to take this question? Anita, I think we had the question clearly. Also, I can take it. It's easy enough. So yeah, we do require your project financials for the site-specific application. So in the IT platform, we will ask for specifics on exactly what your the financials for your projects are. So that includes everything. So the CapEx, the OpEx, the tariff you'll be charging, and so on. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Please send a follow-up if that doesn't.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for stepping in with regards to responding to that question. Next question. What platform will be used for the online application? So for example, under the Nigeria electrification project, we have the Odyssey platform, which allows for private sector companies to apply and access the funds under the NEP. So the question to the Sustainable Energy for All team is, what online platform, or what platform will be used in order to access this online application? There's actually two questions in one. The second part is, how was the $400 per connection derived at? Although I believe I heard $433 per connection, the question is, how was that figure derived at? Thank you very much.
Rosemary, do you want to take that one?
I can take the first part and you can dive into the second part. For the first part of the question, the platform we'll be using is the Odyssey platform. And the subsidy grant is at $433 US, and I'll let our guru Naomi speak to how the connection rate was derived.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So the 433 was actually derived from a very extensive financial model that we put together with a lot of about 13 private sector partners and other sector players, and we verified all the capex costs. So the trick behind this is that we had to find a figure that works for different markets. So this is the figure we arrived at for wave one. We will revise the subsidy amount for subsequent waves, but that will only happen at least 18 months from when we close the first wave. So that's how we came to the number. And if you have any specific concerns, feel free to raise them here.
And if I can just quickly come in to add to what Naomi said. So again, to come up with the subsidy amount, this went through rigorous modeling exercise with data that was really collected and developed from the mini grids developers across different countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. I think a few factors that we focused on included, I would say, 6 main ones. So one was the energy consumption growth. We also accounted for energy losses, auxiliary loads, oversizing margin, as well as what kind of additional generation capacity may be required. And ultimately sort of looked at all of this with the lens of financing to really assess what that viability gap would look like. So again, as Naomi mentioned, our hope is that this is reflective of what we've seen across different countries in the region. But at the same time, while this is being fixed for wave one, the 433 subsidy amount US dollars per mini grid connection, this will be assessed once we start receiving more data, as well as once we've seen if this needs to be tweaked based on what we've witnessed already. Thank you again for that question, and over to you, Anita.
Great, thank you. I have another question here, and it's with respect to, I guess, the impact of COVID on getting access to counterpart funding. So the question here is, given the current global economic situation as a result of COVID, is there any way payment can be modified, or the payment terms can be modified to give room for 40% pre-mobilization of funds before completion and final disbursement upon completion? So essentially, instead of receiving $433 per connection upon successful verification of this connection, is it possible to receive a percentage beforehand of that 433 before completion of this connection? Thank you.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks to the person who's posed this question. Unfortunately, that's not part of the plan, at least part of the plan yet. I will say we will look into different formats if need be at a later point. But for now, the idea is not that we will look at this in a different format apart from the results-based financing 40% that you've raised. So unfortunately, no easy answer here. But I would say we love to be in touch with you, Mr. Alexander, and see how we can help. So if there are any aspects of it that you'd like to go with us in greater detail in your country, we'd be very happy and would really welcome your feedback here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ruchi, for that answer. So I'm just looking through. We have quite a number of questions. I'm hoping we're within time. Are we within time? Do we still have enough time? I know that 40 minutes was allocated to the questions and answer session.
Yes, we do, Anita.
Okay, great. How many minutes do we have right now left so I can time myself?
10, 15 minutes more.
About 15 minutes more. Okay, fab. Okay, so this question, though, was a question I had previously. Okay, no, it's actually a different question. How many connections in order to claim for first disbursement?
Hi, Anita, I can take that. We would like a minimum of 200 connections before a claim report is sent in.
Awesome. So 200 connections before a claim is sent in. Thank you very much for that answer, Rosemary. Okay. Okay, when will applications from Nigeria be considered for the UEF?
Thank you, Anita, and let me take this one. So we would love to launch this in every country and pretty much Pan-Africa as soon as possible. But at the same time, I do want to acknowledge the reality of the situation, particularly in light of the COVID-19 situation. So this is to say that our hope is that, again, we launch this in Sierra Leone and Madagascar very soon. And again, this is rolled out across different countries in Africa next year. So again, at some point, this will not become country by country. This will become Pan-African, and developers who will be ready to apply can apply on a rolling basis. So hopefully this will be done early next year, but we'll obviously keep you posted.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ruchi. I think we have like about 1 or 2 questions left. Please, you do have a bit more time, participants, to send in your questions. We have about 12 minutes or so left. Okay. Okay. Hi, out of curiosity, I would like to know or ask when the application will kick off, and if there is a known time. How do you intend to spread the message when it's time to avoid information getting to interested applicants late? So essentially the question is, when will you kick off the application process? When will you be taking on applications? And there's actually a second part to that question, if you don't mind. Will the applicants be the ones to do the generation design as mentioned on their own, or are we to use a platform for all designs, example, Odyssey? So are the applicants at liberty to essentially produce the designs for their mini grids, or are they sort of limited to an existing design which may be provided on Odyssey?
Hi, Anita, I can take this. To answer the first question, the application process is expected to kick off in Q3 2020. We're also cognizant of the impact of COVID, but the expectation is still that we will roll out in Q3 2020. On the second question, the applicant is welcome to design, to carry out the generation design on their own, and are also welcome to use the Odyssey platform. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Rosemary. Okay, so we have one here. For the renewable fraction of 60%, will natural gas power generators count towards the 60% quota? I'll ask the question again. For the renewable fraction of 60%, will natural gas power generators also count towards the 60% quota?
I can take this one, Anita. Thank you. And thank you for the
Naomi.
question. So for the first wave, we're only looking at solar PV hybrid. And for future phases, we're only looking at renewable energy sources. So natural gas, being a fossil fuel, would not be considered as the primary generation source, but as a backup generation source, that would be fine.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Naomi. Okay.
Anita, if I can just come in very quickly to add a bit more color to what, thank you, to what Naomi already mentioned. So as Naomi stressed that we are looking at renewable energy, and it's specific, we've mentioned that we're looking at solar PV, wind, hydroelectric, or sustainable biomass or biogas, just to expand there.
Great, thank you so much for providing that additional information, Naomi. We have another question here, which is similar to a previous question asked with regards to Nigeria participating. It said, should we expect Rwanda to be a part of the UEF application by next year?
Let me come in here again, Anita. The short answer here and the happy answer here is that yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
We're not excluding countries at all. So at some point, if the private sector is ready to do this in a specific country, we're ready to launch this there.
Okay, fantastic. So I actually have a question. I wanted to, and forgive me if it was actually provided in the presentation, I wanted to find out, how do you go about verifying these connections? Is there an independent verification agency, or will Sustainable Energy for All be carrying out these connections? Will you have multiple IVAs, or would it be one independent verification agency across the countries?
Hi, Anita, I can take that. We expect to verify connections using two means. One, remotely using the Odyssey platform, connecting to the smart meters used to connect the customers. And secondly, we'll be using independent verification agencies on ground in the specified countries. So it could be, we would like to use a local company on ground to do the verification in the specified country.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosemary, for that. I'm going to take, how many minutes do we have left? I think we have about 6 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, let's have 2 more questions and then we can.
2 more questions. Okay, great.
Thank you, Anita.
You're welcome. Thanks. So, okay, this is a really good question. As projects will need to pre-finance before they can receive the grant, are there plans to engage other investors or financiers who can bridge or who can bring bridge finance? So essentially, are you engaging perhaps commercial financiers or commercial banks and other financiers towards supporting these mini-grid developers in securing the much needed counterpart funding for the funds, the $433 per connection that you'll be providing?
Thank you, Anita. And why don't I field that one? So for this phase, unfortunately, we are not going down that path, but that's very much part of our greater vision. So our hope, again, is that since the whole ethos of the project, and that's something I think both Anita, you've mentioned, as well as Damilola mentioned very early on, our idea is to encourage to the greatest extent possible locally owned developers, indigenous developers to apply for this grant. And this is where we think that the UEF can come into, I guess in cases where it's possible, really offer the companies introductions to investors or lenders that may be able to finance these projects. While again, this will not be possible as part of this wave 1 limited to Madagascar and Sierra Leone. This is very much the intention going forward.
Anita, can I just jump in here?
Sure.
To add to what Richie has said, we'll also be actively engaging with stakeholders in the finance world to test their appetite to support local developers and intending applicants.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. I noticed, this is a really good question, and it didn't come via the questions and answers box, but rather the Zoom webinar chat section. The question is, would mini-grids that are already funded with grant financing be eligible for further funding support. So for example, a mini-grid developer in Nigeria has been able to secure a grant agreement under the Nigeria Electrification Project to receive a particular amount per connection from the mini-grid that it develops. Will that same company be able to source for funds under the Universal Energy Facility to further support the development of that same mini-grid that has already accessed financing, for example, under the Nigeria Electrification Project?
Rosemary, I can get this one, but please, looking at Naomi and Rosemary to jump in. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, we are looking for projects, or particularly I think in the site specification phase, where we do want to ensure that they're not, the projects or the site specific connections under those projects are not double funded. So again, we understand that there will be applicants and projects that may already be financed on a concessional basis through other means. And we are hoping that, you know, the UEF will not come in to double fund those sites. That said, we do understand that there may be some corporate level concessional funding, in which case we can sort of look at this case by case. But again, to make sure that there is no double dipping here, we do want to ensure that, you know, this is a fair process in that sense. There is this other clause, and I'm happy to send more information through around this, where we say that the applicants are required to certify through a letter that the connections for which they're applying for a grant will not have been funded either wholly or to a partial extent by any other site specification connection grant coming through any other concessional financing. Again, hope that's clear, and hopefully I understood the question. But looking at my colleagues to jump in if they have anything to add here.
Nothing to add.
Okay, Naomi, anything to add?
No, Richie covered everything.
Okay, great. So those are our last two questions. I'd like to also, before we close, I would like to ask Rosemary and Richie if either of them have any final comments. I could also ask Naomi as well, who has been helpful in answering a number of the questions as well put out there. Thank you. So starting off with Rosemary, thanks.
Hi, thank you, and thank you all for joining the webinar. It's been great, and the questions have been very helpful and will help us rethink some of the processes, and we'll be happy to share answers to the remaining questions that we were not able to reach during the session, and we'll be sending out an information pack that will hopefully cover any other queries you may have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosemary. And Richie?
Thanks, Anita. And I guess I'll just sort of quickly round up to say what we heard from Damilola early on as well, to say that we're extremely committed here as part of the Universal Energy Facility to support local developers. And we want to make sure that we see these benefits stay local, both with the jobs as well as the economic opportunity. Again, we would love to keep this a constant dialogue and not just a one-off webinar. So we'd love to be in touch with you. Feel free to write to me or our team, and make sure again that we have this, we hear your voices and are able to incorporate in a meaningful way. So would love to be engaged, and again, feel free to write to us at any point.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Richie. And Naomi, if you have some last words as well.
Yeah, just to say thank you very much for joining the webinar. It's always really useful to have the people that we are hoping to be beneficiaries as part of the process. We'll do our best with this first wave, and of course, there are subsequent waves to come, and we'll hopefully roll out in more countries. And we're hoping to engage with you even in those other countries as we grow this facility. Thank you very much.
Anita, if I can come in quickly again, sorry.
Oh, please.
Anita, no, first of all, I guess thank you to you and the speaker so much. We know this is a very busy time for everyone, so really appreciate the participation. But I was also hoping if we could just have a last set of comments from you as well as the panelists, that would be terrific.
No problem whatsoever. Thank you, Rochi. So with that being requested for, I'd like to ask Catherine to please give us some very brief closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Anita. This was a brilliant initiative. I think it's not the last one. As we said, in Africa, we need the support of partners to make sure that we grow into renewable energy. So I thank all the conferences who came along with me. I thank the people. The questions are very interesting, and hopefully we have another opportunity to join hands again for the benefit of renewable energy in Africa.
Thank you, Catherine. And if I can ask Mr. Segun to also provide us with some remarks.
All right, thank you, Anita. And I'll say a very well coordinated event, very well done. Thanks to the presenters. The UEF is pretty very clear now. I'm very sure, local companies were very ready to be part of this. And if there are other further questions, I'm sure we'll be shooting at emails at Rosemary, Ruchi, and the team at SE4. Then also, I'm sure there will be frequently asked questions that will address some of those questions that have been asked that maybe because of time we couldn't answer. All right, so we're looking forward to a great program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I can ask Mr. Sunday to also provide us with some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you all for organizing this great webinar. I think it was well attended, and so many questions that were probably not answered and asked. I think next time we should make it a little bit a longer session for the Q&A. But I'm glad that the team is, the SE4O team is already available for more questions and suggestions from the developers. And we look forward to this project being deployed as soon as possible. I think we mentioned about next year. Hopefully it could come as early as January 1st. Thank you all and have a good one and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Ms. Leah, if you can provide us with your closing remarks, please. Is Leah there? Okay, moving on to Mr. Isaiah.
I think I was on, apologies, okay. I think I was on mute.
No problem, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm excited coming from Sierra Leone as amongst the first contact countries. I would like SE4All to really think about sort of like almost not drawing distinction between indigenous and local companies, but to just sort of like create some clarity around that, because I see a slight distinction between an indigenous company and a local company. We have a lot of international players that are registered as local partners, and it would be really good to see how we could potentially be deliberate in targeting indigenous companies. The first thing. The second thing I'd like us to also consider is this double dipping. The established players that are already funded by, certainly in Sierra Leone, that are already funded with grant financing. It would be good to really review those areas, how we are making sure that we're not double financing established players. So we're grateful and we're excited about the opportunity and looking forward to further engagement.
Thank you so much for that, Leah. And if I can now ask Mr. Isaiah to also provide his final closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks to the SE for organizing this webinar. I think it was quite enlightening. I think it's something that's long overdue. What will be key and interesting for some of us is maybe a further discussion after your first wave of Madagascar and Sierra Leone, so that we can all learn from the real life experiences and exposures. Other areas maybe to consider: does the grant finance interest charges from local finance that somebody would have obtained? Do you consider people who have experience, who want to start new projects? They have had experience elsewhere, but they have a new vehicle which doesn't have a track record. Do you consider things like that? I think there is probably more questions that people can ask, but I think this was a very good platform, and we are excited that you are rolling out this program, and it's quite well needed in the energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isaiah, for that. Now, as we reach a close, I would like to thank Ms. Damilola Gumbi, who is the CEO and Special Representative of the UN for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy. I'd like to thank our very important panel members or guest speakers, as well as the SE4All team for putting this presentation together, putting this webinar together. Super grateful for it. I've learned a lot from it, and I'm excited to see the impact it will have in Africa, especially as it concerns encouraging our indigenous mini-grid developers in getting involved in achieving universal access to electrification in Africa. And last but not the least, to thank all the participants for joining, taking time out of their busy schedule to actually hear about the Universal Energy Facility. Just to mention that SE4All team will be sharing an information pack as well as this presentation with you all, should you require this information at hand, and are also available to answer any questions you may have if you send via email. Thank you very much, and have a good remainder of the week. Thank you. Bye-bye.